So just a quick note, everybody, this meeting is being recorded. Not going to go too much into the ground rules again, since everybody pretty much just heard them, but just a quick couple of reminders. If you do have questions towards the end, just make sure you use the raise hand feature. For folks on the phone, you can unmute by pressing *6. Please make sure that you are stay muted unless you are being asked to ask your question. You can raise your hand by pressing *9 or using the emotions feature on the bottom of Zoom. With that, we're just going to jump into it. Just a couple of quick recap slides just to make sure that we all kind of know where we're at, and then we're just going to kind of get into majority discussion here. So with that. So this is the recreational breakout, so hopefully you're all in the right spot.
You would like to be sent?
The Puget Sound Recreational for Ken Town.
Please make sure that you're muted. Thank you. So just a quick agenda for this breakout. We're just going to go quickly again through both the Puget Sound saltwater and freshwater season proposals. We'll get into some considerations and also some of the feedback that we've heard thus far. And then we'll be able to get into some more modeling details and have plenty of time for questions and comments. So again, just a quick forecast recap. I just showed this a little while ago, but just to kind of recap again. As we all know, at this point, Chinook stocks are down 36% and hatchery stocks are up 6% from the 10-year average. Puget Sound Coho, both natural and hatchery stocks are up from the 10-year average. For Puget Sound chum, natural stocks are down about 61% and hatchery stocks are down 64% from the 10-year average. So again, these are the Chinook management objectives for Puget Sound. And once again, the highlighted in the yellow-orange color are the stocks that we're currently not meeting our management objectives in the current season proposal. So these are the stocks that we're going to be discussing in more detail. Derek walked us through some of the more details in the main session, and we'll have a chance to talk about that again. For the Coho management objectives, once again, we're looking at the Strait of Wdfw stocks being under a rebuilding plan. The Hood Canal Coho are currently in an overfished status. The Snohomish Coho are currently under a rebuilding plan, and they're managed to a minimum escapement target of 55,000. So just getting into the season proposals. So again, I put this up earlier, but the Chinook proposed season is in front of you right now. Just some of the changes from last year. Again, areas 5 and 6, no change. Area 7, that would be an August 15th start with that February winter Chinook fishery added in. For area 9, it would be an August 1 start to the end of September. For area 10, that winter Chinook season would be February only in the current proposal. For area 11, it would be a June 1 start. And area 12, 13, there is no changes. The Coho season is up in front of you now. And just to kind of go through some of those changes again. So area 5, 6, no change. Area 7, again, that would be that August 15th start to the end of September, and this would be a marked selective fishery. Somebody did ask a question in the chat in the last one. I have this up as a marked selective fishery just because this is a change. So this is not the only marked selective Coho fishery in Puget Sound, just to kind of clarify that. For area 9, it would be an August 1 start. For area 10, no change. For area 11, that June 1 start. For area 12, south of Ayoc, again, no change. Quilcene would start August 1st. North of Ayoc would start September 1st, the rest of the area. And for area 13, no change. So moving into the freshwater seasons, for those of you who are in attendance on Monday, this will be a review. Nothing has really changed since then in terms of the proposals, but just to kind of briefly go through them again. On the Nooksack, there's a potential spring Chinook season. For Coho, it's the same as last year. For the Samish, there's been a couple suggestions for anti-snagging rules to go into effect. On the Skagit, the hatchery, spring, and Coho are both similar to 2021. For Sockeye, there are proposed lake and river opportunities. There's also an additional river reach that has been proposed from Gilligan to the Dalles. And in general, expect day and area closures to avoid conflict with treaty fisheries. Moving down to the Central Sound River systems, this is still a Squamish. The season is similar to 2021. For the Snohomish, the current proposal includes a Chinook marked selective fishery on the Skykomish River and a Coho marked selective fishery on the Wallace River. In Lake Washington, the season is similar to 2021. On the Green Duwamish, it's also similar to 2021. However, that will be a Chinook 2 fish daily limit that's proposed currently. And then moving down to the South Sound River systems in the Puyallup and Carbon, the season is similar relative to 2021. There is a reduced weekly fishing schedule, and some of the conversation there has included whether to go mark selective for Coho and the Puyallup, and I'm sure that'll come up later and we can have some more discussion about that. And then the Nisqually, there's similar seasons proposed to 2021. In the Skokomish, it's closed until further notice. And in the Dungeness, a mark selective Coho fishery has been proposed for October. So just again, to recap some of the considerations for the 2022 salmon season, forecasts for Puget Sound Chinook and Coho stocks are modestly improved over recent years. The Chinook stocks continue to be depressed relative to their status at listing and are designated in crisis as well. There are low expected returns of natural Chinook to both the Stillaguamish and the Snohomish rivers, as we talked about earlier. There are low expected returns of natural Coho in the South Sound, Hood Canal, and the Strait of Wdfw stocks. There is potential to have both the Queets and the Snohomish stocks rebuilt. Chum stocks are similar to chum stocks returning to South Sound and Hood Canal are similar to 2021. And again, those continued concerns for southern resident killer whales. So just to kind of move into some of the feedback we've heard thus far, we've heard a lot of requests to have July opportunities for both areas 7 and 9, and that's something that we will definitely be discussing more in detail today. We've heard for a July 16th opener for area 7 and 9, again, something we'll discuss more today. If somebody is unmuted, can you please make sure your microphone is muted? Thank you. We've heard a request for a June 1 opener for area 10. We've heard requests for areas 9 and 10 the same day summer opener. We've heard requests for common winter fisheries. And we've heard requests for January and February winter Chinook fishing in area 7. We've heard requests to have it a 1 king 2 salmon limit in area 5. We've heard requests for no size limits. And we've heard requests for gear restrictions in the winter fishery. So those are just some of the feedback that we've heard so far this year, and we'd be happy to kind of discuss any more of those in detail. Once again, I'll switch it over to Dr. Derek Dapp, who can run through his modeling genius that I cannot do. So I'm going to stop sharing now and I'll let Derek pull up his screen.
So Derek, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in while you're getting your screen set up. So I see there's quite a few folks on the line, really excited about having folks together today. I just want to reiterate, there's been a lot of chatter out there in social media and elsewhere that this is a done deal. This is not a done deal on seasons for 2022-23. We're here to take comments and feedback on proposals to take forward and try to finalize. We understand there's a lot of disagreement, I guess, in the angling community about the initial modeling proposal. So I just want to make sure that folks understand we're here today to listen and take suggestions and try to craft something that we're going to actually probably take to the co-managers tomorrow for changes to our initial proposed modeling package. So thanks for that interlude as we move over to Derek. Derek's going to walk through some more details, and we're going to get into some scenario and other results from modeling, particularly around Chinook. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mark. I'm going to go through a very, very quick recap just of Coho. I think that kind of more of the modeling will focus on Chinook today, but just a quick recap on Coho was that in the high ocean option, we're currently exceeding objectives on the Fraser River, the Thompson fish, the Wdfw fish, and the Hood Canal fish. That's only in the high ocean option. And then just keeping in mind that we're going to be paying attention to Snohomish, which we have an escapement goal of 55,000 fish. And currently our modeling is ranging between about 40 and 41,000 fish. So that's a very, very brief overview of Coho, but maybe switching back to Chinook for just a second and to give a quick reminder of where we're at there. For Chinook, once again, kind of the main stocks that as we move into some of the modeling exercises and some of the scenarios, and I actually just saw, Mark, is that a new hand raised or? For some of the modeling exercises and scenarios, we're really going to be focusing on Stillaguamish and Snohomish particularly. We'll get into that more in just a moment, as well as looking at kind of some of the other stocks where we see that we have exceedances, Nisqually, Skokomish, Skagit, and Nooksack. So those are going to be kind of the focal stocks as we move into some of the Chinook modeling. And as we move into exploring some of the Chinook modeling, a lot of folks are probably familiar with the use of this tool. We've been using it for kind of a few years now in some of our previous public meetings this year. But just for anybody new on the line, I'm going to do a quick run through of what we're looking at here. This tool is representing kind of the outputs from our middle ocean option set of runs, our most recent set of Chinook runs. And we can see kind of some of the key objectives that we're monitoring in this row that I've highlighted now, row 5. And going across the board here, we can see from that initial set of middle ocean option model runs, here's kind of how the unmarked SUS exploitation rate for Stillaguamish, the marked SUS exploitation rate for Stillaguamish, the number of non-treaty mortalities for Stillaguamish, Snohomish, Southern US exploitation rates for Stillaguamish, Nisqually total exploitation rates for Stillaguamish, Skokomish total exploitation rates for Stillaguamish, as well as another metric that we're monitoring, our total marine Puget Sound sport catch. And now, as a reminder, if we look here at row 7, we can see what our management goals are for each of these metrics for this year. And as a reminder of what those are, we need to, at the end of the process, we need to be at 9% unmarked SUS for Stillaguamish, as well as a 14% marked SUS exploitation rate for Stillaguamish. So you can see kind of in that initial set of modeling runs where we are in relation to those management objectives. What I would say is particularly for Stillaguamish, we do try to achieve a 50-50 sharing of the total mortalities for that stock that are available with the co-managers. And by my estimation, at the end of the process, to reach these management objectives, it means that there will be somewhere between 67 and 70 Stillaguamish mortalities available for the non-treaty fleet. And so where we're at currently is we're just around 77 mortalities. And by the end of the process, we're going to be somewhere in this range of 67 to 70. So what that means is that we will have to make a little bit of movement somewhere to reduce Stillaguamish mortalities by the end of the process, but we're not too far off, and we have a range of scenarios that we can explore to get there on that. That's going to be kind of the primary objective that we're going to be monitoring as we go through some of these scenario modeling exercises. However, there's if folks are interested, we should also be paying attention to Snohomish, Nisqually, Skokomish, and once again, just our total marine Puget Sound sport catch to see kind of the changes we make, how efficient they are for the total catch. So as we go through and moving down now, in this column A, we see kind of potential actions that we could take in each marine area and time period. And if we were to signify taking one of these actions, we could put an X in this B column over here. In this action that I've highlighted over here, this is essentially modeling the same preseason season as last year, particularly for Marine Area 7. What that represents is that represents a fishery in July, the second half of August as marked selective, and then non-retention for the first half of August as well as for September. As we kind of go through that, the needed quota that we would expect that would be required to have a fishery of that magnitude would be 5,700 fish approximately. And we can see kind of, if we put that X in that box, we can see how that changes post-action, kind of how that changes some of our management objectives over here. So we can see that, for example, the non-treaty Stillaguamish mortalities goes up by approximately 18 mortalities. And we can see kind of how other metrics are affected as well. So once again, we have kind of a range of different options for many of our marine areas. We've really focused on marine areas 5 through 10 as we're kind of using Stillaguamish as one of our main benchmarks here in the number of mortalities that we're having. We do have kind of the greatest Stillaguamish impacts in those areas 5 through 10. For folks who, I see Alex's hand out, I'll get to that in just a moment. But for folks who might have been in attendance during the Monday night meeting, you will recognize that this tool is similar to Monday night's tool. It's almost exactly the same, with just an additional option added in here for Marine Area 7 summer. This was kind of a suggestion that one of our constituents had and wanted to see it modeled for Wednesday. So I had added that in there as well, which represents a Chinook retention fishery marked selective in September only. So maybe that's a good place to pause before we start getting into specific scenarios. And Alex, I'd recognize your hand raised.
Thanks, Derek. So I'm just curious. So when we first came in here, Kirsten, you listed some potential, some things that we've recommended or we've said. So, but in these options 1 through 6 for Marine Area 7, I don't see, like a scenario where we would be a July 1st through July 16th, or a July 16th through the end of July. Is that not something that we explored? Would we see a change of our impacts if we only did a 2-week opener for the first part of July or even the second part of July? And then also, actually, we'll go with, I'll follow up with this one later. So yeah, do we not see an option for like a July 1st to July 16th?
At the moment, I don't have an option in this tool for looking at a half July opener, whether that's the first half or the latter half. That's something that I can examine though, and get to us in kind of a future set of modeling scenarios.
Well, we're going to present something to the co-managers tomorrow. So, I mean, that doesn't leave us a lot of time for us to look at that.
Todd?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a similar question a little differently. I think prior seasons for Marine Area 7 had a July opener. Was there logic for not including that? Is there a net benefit for making it August versus July, since it's a change from what we had been doing?
So Todd, there were a few considerations there within the modeling. First is that July is quite a productive month that we see in Marine Area 7. And what we saw last year, and something that we'd like to avoid happening again, is where we have it open for a week and then it closes very quickly. Also, in kind of that week that we were open, we had exceeded our preseason impacts. So we were looking at potential other options here where we could kind of increase that quota for Marine Area 7, make it less likely to be exceeding our impacts from what we had modeled in the preseason, as well as kind of trying to get some additional opportunity there. And one kind of solution that we had considered and we'd heard that might be an option would be to fish a little bit later, overlapping with the Coho season. And by doing so, we could remove the non-retention impacts that we have for Chinook during that Coho directed period. And by removing some of those non-retention impacts, we can then allocate those additional impacts that would have been for non-retention, and we could allocate that toward a greater quota in the Marine Area 7 fishery. So that was kind of one of our considerations there, and also recognizing that July tends to be a little bit more productive than the August and September period. That might be another way of tempering that catch so that we remain open for a longer period of time on the water for the quota that we do have.
Great, thanks, Derek. Appreciate the insight. That was great.
I see Steve has a question. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I was curious because I mean, we just recognize that July is a more productive month for Chinook and Area 7. I think that sportsmen want to take part in, a more productive time. We realize it has more of an impact on the stock, but have we thought about if we open the other marine areas at the same time, take a little pressure off Area 7? Because then not everybody's flocking to Area 7 for Chinook because it's the only option open at the time. If that makes sense. Has that been considered?
Yeah, and Derek can jump in here and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe right now, as the proposed season does have overlapping seasons open for that summer. So there's a lot of other opportunity that are open for that same time period. So, but that is something that we consider when we set these seasons, is making sure that it's not kind of a derby mentality, which is something that, has happened in the past. So we're trying to avoid that. So.
Right, because I think that was the case heavily last year for Area 7, which
Yeah,
maybe was why the stocks were impacted so quickly.
Well, I think the part of the issue with Area 7 last year too is just that really, really hot opener right over a holiday weekend. And I think that's one of the other things that we're trying to kind of minimize that impact with having just that much fishing pressure over like a kind of a short time period. So I think that was the other kind of precipice for moving it out of that early July time period, just to kind of relieve that pressure. But yeah, you're correct.
All right, thanks.
And I see Pat. Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you. I'd like to make a specific proposal that's not in the tool, Derek, as it is constructed right now. But I think you've probably had something like this from some of the constituents that have written to you. Anyway, here it is. The objective here is working from, well, I want to state that I appreciate the initial proposal from Wdfw, because it does increase the amount of Chinook available for harvest, and with a much larger quota than last year. And then I think the objective here is to have a sufficient season to catch that full amount. And we probably want to maximize the number of days of salmon fishing opportunity. But I'm also agreeing with a number of people who have said that they feel like a delay until a start of August 16th won't provide, Chinook won't be around, and there won't provide a realistic opportunity to catch those fish, some 3,000 plus quota. So what I'm proposing is a advanced start of August 1, and to go through Labor Day, the 5th of September. And and then adjust the quota probably slightly downward in order to meet the objectives of the Stillaguamish total allowable impact, the impact share for non-treaty fisheries. And I don't think that's going to take too much of an adjustment downward to do. And I'd like to see that model run. And here's just a little twist on this. So August 1 through September 5, all species. And I guess that means it would be Coho selective, as well as selective for Chinook. And then if at the end of the period of time that's open for Chinook, there are additional impacts remaining, if the quota is uncaught and the encounters and the total impacts, if there are some remaining, then have an extension, Chinook non-retention extension for Coho salmon after Labor Day through the end of September. So if that's not clear, ask me to clarify, but I'm trying to make it kind of a simple alternative, one that isn't drastically different from what was already proposed, because I think that puts you into a bit of a bind in working with the tribes in negotiations, but it addresses some clear objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And we can get that one modeled too. While I don't have that specific scenario modeled right here, I would imagine that it might produce a result that's kind of similar to this scenario 6 over here. the way that this scenario 6 is structured is basically looking at August non-retention and then September open. It's similar, a little bit different to kind of what you'd proposed if we would flip August as being retention until the 5th of September, and then September potentially being non-retention afterwards. But this could give us an idea of potentially how it might look similar to. So we do see that it would represent a reduction from kind of what we currently have in our proposal for Stiligwamish mortalities. And once again, I can go back after this meeting's over and model that very specific scenario and get back to you on that.
Thanks, Pat. Next, I see Jeffrey's hand.
Hi, Derek. I've got a much more general question for you about the performance of the model that you use to evaluate these different proposed regulations. I'm curious if you can summarize how looks backwards at previous years' impact estimates have measured up with the M&E data that, from the fisheries. So, I mean, in certain cases, you're talking about differences of 6 or 7 mortalities, to decide which regulation package to go with. And I'm just curious about the accuracy and the precision, how this tool has performed since you're relying on it pretty heavily.
Thanks for that, Jeffrey. So I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of uncertainty that goes into our calculations in the preseason, everything from forecasts of abundance. Those forecasts of abundance are going to come back differently in the postseason relative to what we see in the preseason. And that's kind of the nature of what we do. Everything from that to, seeing different ratios of legals and sublegals and as well as just catches themselves. The way the fisheries manage, there tends to be, if anything, there's usually less mortalities than there in the postseason than there is in the preseason, and that has to do with kind of how fisheries are managed. Where if we kind of hit our caps, we shut down, but there are occasionally also times when fisheries don't hit those caps, and so it's more likely that there's an underage and an overage. That isn't a 100% rule. There are exceptions to that. If we're thinking specifically about some of the stocks, we had some exceedances in some areas last year, and that was kind of something that we don't always see, but something that could contribute to that. So I know that this doesn't get exactly to your question, but as we're doing this, we're trying to make a best guess, and we're always trying to improve our models. As far as kind of the pre versus post, as far as the quotas themselves. Each year, me and my team, we go through and we kind of adjust and we look at the methodologies that we're using. And one thing that we do is we say kind of what quota would be sufficient, such that if we use that methodology in 6 out of 8 of the last years, that we would not exceed our impacts in the preseason versus the postseason. So we do take into account a little bit of a buffer measurement there, just to ensure that, to try to help ensure the fisheries stay open, as well as ensure that we don't go over our impacts. But, just being honest, there's a lot of sources of uncertainty as we go into the modeling.
The next hand I see is from Paul, but before I get to your question, Paul, I just wanted to check, Todd, if you have a residual hand up or if you have a new question. And if so, I'll get to that next. If it's residual, you can just put your hand down. But the next hand that I see is from Paul. Paul, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So a couple things. Somebody previously brought up spreading out the fleet, so to speak, in different areas, which I think we've seen is an important part of the strategy for setting seasons. Certainly if everybody's in one area fishing, quotas are going to go much faster. It seems to me a proposal where Area 7 and Area 9 start on July 16th might more effectively do that. We still have ocean fisheries open, 5 and 6 are open, 10 and 11 are open, and so forth. you're not going to get a large concentration of people, for instance, in area, running up to area 7, because that might be their only closest opportunity and nothing else is really going on. And so that would be one idea that I think might work a little bit better. The other part of that is, while maybe some larger quotas in 9 with an August start seem great, I think we all know that there's no way we're going to hit those numbers if we start the 1st of August. And like previously mentioned, as anglers, we would rather fish more productive times when hatchery fish are moving through, especially. The second question, specifically to Area 7, is with what happened last year, which was definitely not a very good thing that happened. There seems to be some question over the accuracy of the numbers for what was actually caught. From what I understand, there was not a test fishery boat employed during that fishery. How confident are you of those numbers, and what is your plan for the future to make sure that will be completely accurate?
So I'll take that one. You're right, Paul. We didn't get a fully operational test fishery out on the water to start that fishery last year. And it's not unusual for a lot of our monitoring of these fisheries to have to be pretty data poor at the beginning of the fishery. A lot of times we struggle, we see wild swings in our estimation just based on kind of the few data points that we have to start off these fisheries. So to characterize the estimate as not accurate, I mean, obviously we have confidence values and levels of precision around all of our estimates. Yeah, it was probably higher than we like it to be, but I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as inaccurate. We have different methodologies we use in the absence of test fishing data or other data that allows us to still produce an estimate with a certain level of precision around it. So we have several tools in our toolbox to be able to evaluate these fisheries. And the not having a test fishing boat out on the water was something that I'm sure many of you who are business owners or others during the pandemic felt. Getting people onboarded, the job market's been a little tough to fill these temporary positions. So it's one of those that, yeah, the agency has struggled with and continues to struggle with as we kind of move beyond the past couple of years and how we've all been adjusting to COVID and the pandemic. So I guess that's how I would characterize that estimate. I didn't know if you had any follow-up there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and just from somebody who was up there fishing that during some of that time, it was a little surprising, the people that I had spoken to, and I found myself that the fishery did not seem quite as productive as the season closing quickly said it was. And so maybe that was, and I understand that that's not hard data, but it just kind of seemed that way. So that was kind of the reason for the question. But getting back to, the July 16th openers for both of those areas and spreading the opportunity around, I still feel that would, even if that meant slightly lower quotas to get us where we need to be, I think we're going to have people that are going to have more productive trips, more success. We're not going to have huge pressure all in one area or in just a couple areas. So I'm hoping that can be seriously considered. Thank you.
Thanks. And I see the next hand I see is Kurt Kramer. Go ahead, Kurt. Kurt, you're still muted.
There, I got it.
There you go. You got it.
I just want to make a comment. As I read the numbers, we're currently our suite of fisheries about maybe 12% over our goal. And I understand people want to get more opportunity, and I'm all for that. But at the same time, we're going to have to make some cuts. It may be productive if we want to increase opportunities, how we also reduce the numbers to stay within the guidelines. Or do we just want to defer those tough decisions without guidance to the state team in April? Just a comment.
Thanks, Kurt. I see Alex's hand up next.
Two things. Mark, you might be able to confirm this with me, but is it true or is it not true that per our agreements with NIMS and NOAA that the state is required to have a test fishery while there is an open fishery on ESA listed fish? Is that true or not true?
That's not true. We don't have a test fishery in Area 13 and it's open year round.
Okay, so okay, not true that it's a requirement to have a test boat while ESA listed impacts are occurring.
NOAA requires the co-managers to evaluate our fisheries and provide estimates of impact as part of the monitoring and evaluation of those fisheries.
So because us not having a test fishery, we're in violation of that requirement?
No, because as I explained to Paul, we still have ways of evaluating impact without a test boat.
Okay. Wow. Can we look, Derek, at what it would appear if we eliminated the winter fishery in Area 7?
I know you're there. I do.
Should be on screen now, Alex. You can see how it changes the Still-Squamish mortalities, brings it down by about 4.
All right.
Okay, the next hand I see is from Adam. Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I got a question about I'm looking at the table here. Management goal for mortalities for Still-Squamish Chinook 67 to 70. And the total expected run is, I believe, 983. At a 10% release mortality, that means we're catching 700 of those fish to come up with that 70. Is that correct?
No. So the way that our exploitation rates work, it's actually a little bit different than looking at the terminal run size. The terminal run size, i.e. the number of fish expected to return to the river, is that 983 that you were referencing earlier. The way that we calculate our exploitation rates is actually based on the total adult abundance, of which the terminal run size is a very large component of it. But it also includes any adult mortalities that occur in the marine areas as well. So it looks at kind of that total abundance metric. The 67 to 70 mortalities from non-treaty is calculated basically. I ran some scenarios to look at kind of what it would take to get us to meet our management objectives of 9% unmarked SUS exploitation rate and 14% marked SUS exploitation rate. And to achieve those objectives, I believe that the unmarked SUS exploitation rate will be more constraining this year. That'll be the harder one for us to get down. And in order to get there, both us and the tribes would need to be somewhere in that range of 67 to 70 mortalities, achieving that kind of 50-50 sharing goal of the mortalities for that stock that I'd kind of referenced earlier. There is a little bit of a swing. There's a little bit of a wiggle room right now in that total number of mortalities available, which is why I put it as a range. It kind of matters what fisheries change as to the number of mortalities that are available to meet that unmarked SUS objective. But I'm thinking that right now, if folks remember, maybe 2 weeks ago, I had a much larger range. I'm thinking now that kind of narrowing the range to this 67 to 70 for both the treaty and non-treaty, as in approximately 140 fish total, is probably where we're going to end up at the end of the process.
So the total Still-Squamish run that comes headed this way would be 983 plus 140. Is that? If there was no fisheries, there'd be
No,
1,100.
no, but you have kind of the right, you're on the right track there. The one key difference is that in the calculation you're making there, you hadn't included northern fisheries. So if you include the mortalities from northern fisheries as well.
And the 67 to 70 number just seems very high if the total run is only 1,000. Okay, I'll take your word for that, I guess. Yeah. Second question is, what about a July 16th Area 9 opener for a set, like 1 week planned, and then reevaluate the catch rate and a reopener?
We do have down here in the tool, we do have different options for looking at Marine Area 9 opening kind of July 16th. I think that we actually, this scenario 1, 2, and 4, all look at it in different ways. This scenario 1 for Marine Area 9 looks at kind of a full quota, as if doing that, as I mentioned kind of earlier, that 6 out of 8 years we're unlikely to exceed that quota. That's what that 8,900 represents. But we have kind of other options built in here too. So if we just looked at kind of a recent year average of effort without including that additional kind of piece, looking at the 6 out of 8 years, and then we have also, of course, just looking at kind of the quota that we had last year. So if you were interested, we could look at one of these and see how it affects things. Kind of the second part of your suggestion of if we could, have maybe a week or a period open and then take a short pause to evaluate and look back at that quota. That strategy might be more effective in some of these cases where we have a smaller quota, such as in this scenario 4. That's where something like that could be of great value potentially, I think.
Okay, and the next hand I see is from Todd. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I was going to jump back a little bit to Area 7. I'm going to speak from experience and just ask if the model incorporates this a little bit. I know there was discussion about early and late seasons, and some are beneficial more than others. As far as late seasons go, at least it's been my experience that the Samish River has a lot of hatchery fish, and they tend to show up later in the summer, typically later August, early September. And that would be a benefit to run later in the year, as the fish tend to specifically pool up in Area 7. Does a model incorporate that and consider that a benefit to have that season open later in the year?
Unfortunately, at least as far as the modeling goes, we don't incorporate that. We look at kind of in the modeling, we're looking at coded wire tag recoveries to determine kind of the stock composition that we're seeing in a fishery during any given period, and kind of the way that those coded wire tags get aggregated is looking at July through September. So at least currently in the modeling tool that we have available, we don't have the ability to differentiate specifically between, say, September and July.
Okay, thanks. Might be something to consider, but it's just observation, not facts, but maybe something to consider.
Thanks, Todd.
So Derek, if I might jump in, another thing to consider there is Bellingham Bay does open mid-August. That fishery is modeled separately. And we do know that we catch a lot of Samish fish in that time, in that area as well, whenever that's open, starting mid-August.
Yep, thank you. Yep.
I see David is the next hand up. Go ahead, David.
Okay, you mentioned that you take southern resident killer whales into consideration, and I wonder if you could expand on what that means.
So maybe I'll take this one, David. On southern resident killer whales, as folks are probably aware, kind of some of their main areas of usage that we see in Puget Sound are in the Straits, but particularly in Marine Area 7. In Marine Area 7, we we see them kind of, the dietary data shows that a large part of what they're consuming during the summertime in that area is Fraser run fish. Fraser run fish are mostly unmarked. There's for the Fraser run fish, if we look at them in aggregate, there's kind of an earlier spring and summer timed run, and then a later fall timed run. For the earlier spring timed run, it's typically about 95% of the run is unmarked, and then in the later time period, about 98% of it is unmarked. So by having marked selective fisheries, we're releasing those Fraser fish that could be of benefit to southern resident killer whales. It's simultaneously, of course, in some of these areas where there's larger impacts on Stillaguamish and Snohomish and kind of some of the other stocks that we're considering. It's of course a benefit there as well to those. So I think that's kind of one of our main considerations that we've been thinking about for southern resident killer whales, and how some of those seasons are shaping up this year.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. I see Rodney is the next hand up.
Thank you. Am I missing something in Marine Area 10? Is there a Chinook retention this summer in Marine Area 10? Thank you.
We've currently got it. We do currently have it modeled as the same season as last year in Marine Area 10, Rodney.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I see Henry. Go ahead, Henry.
Yeah, I have a few comments and questions. I'll just kind of throw them all out there because it might require a couple different people to respond. But you know, as you might know, my only real concern is Area 7. I don't really have any interest in fishing anywhere else. The first comment is, you know, has to do with actually catching that quota. And this was brought up earlier. You know, with that late opening, you know, what happens if we don't catch that quota? It seems like it's probably lost, where the co-managers, I'm not aware of them ever not catching their quota. It's a lot easier with, you know, kind of nets in a river to you know, get your share. And so that's my first concern is with that late opening, not getting, you know, our share of the fish. You know, with that in mind, I think you should model a mid-July opening, and consider the 3 day a week sort of model like you use with halibut. And I think you did that with, I don't know if it was 9 or 10 or something. You know, there was a winter fishery this year that I think had a couple day a week thing, but I don't know if that would allow us to impact some of that quota earlier in the season when the fishing's better, but also not end up in a situation where Wdfw doesn't have the the numbers crunched in time to avoid blowing over the quota. And I'd say with that, you should consider having some kind of guidelines for at certain points in the season, knowing we have a quota of X fish. If we hit Y by 2 weeks into the season, well, then you close until to preserve that that quota for the for impacts during the Coho season. Additionally, and I know I'm just kind of going on here, but I'm getting everything off my plate. I suspect that last year the problem was that we had this opening over a July 4 holiday weekend. I assumed that you did not have people in the office really taking the data from the creel surveys and wherever else, whatever data you were getting. I assumed that nobody was really running that through your in-season monitoring models until Monday or Tuesday when they got back into the office. I think with the slim, small quotas and slim margins that we're dealing with, especially on those opening weekends, people need to be in the office crunching those numbers to make sure we don't hit something like that again. And the last comment is Bellingham Bay. There's it seems to be some pretty good numbers of fish headed for the Samish. And, I'm concerned about us, being able to impact those or, and so I would say, I brought it up before, if there's a way to expand that area just a little bit to get to that Weemus channel, or I'd say add a couple more hatchery bonus Chinook, because I think right now you can have 2 Chinook marked or unmarked and 4 fish total, assuming you catch some Coho. If you could add a couple more clipped Chinook in there for the hatchery fish. But that's everything I have. Thank you for listening.
All right, next I see Robert. Robert, go ahead.
Am I reading your numbers correctly that for the winter blackmouth fishery in Area 7, you estimate about 892 fish caught?
That's correct, Robert.
That's correct.
That seems pretty high with the weather we have up here in the winter time. I never see that many boats out there fishing in the winter time. I wonder if those numbers are much higher than expected.
Well, Robert, maybe you don't remember that there's been winter blackmouth derbies in the month of February in the past, and all these data are used from past estimates of time and area usage on the water. So there has been a bunch of fishing effort in the month of February in the past.
Weren't those fishing tournaments always in March, the end of March?
Not to my recollection.
I know the big Anacortes one is in the end of March. That used to be.
There was a Friday Harbor one that happened in February.
Oh, that's true. That's true. It just seems like those 3 months, you just don't, there's exceptions to every rule, but it doesn't seem like there's that much pressure on the Chinook in the wintertime.
So I just pulled it up, Robert. I pulled open kind of our recent year seasons where we were open in February in Marine Area 7, our Chinook catch during that period. And it looks like it's varied a lot. It looks like we had kind of a low point in 2017 where there was a catch of 221 fish, but it kind of ranged all the way up to 1345 fish just for the month of February. There were a few months in there were a few years in there where it was hovering around the 900 fish. So actually, when I was looking at that number, when I was looking at that number, it was the number that our model spit out. But if anything, I was actually concerned about it because I thought it might actually be a little bit low, given that that fishery hasn't been open in a little while. There's probably going to be a lot of interest and participation there. That's kind of just what I was seeing based off the past data.
Okay, next I see Zachary. Zachary, go ahead.
All right, hi. Sorry if it's pretty loud. I'm in a loud area right now. But I'm just going to continue sort of what I kind of always say is that time on the water, really is the critical factor. And I think that we really need to give Puget Sound anglers a chance to fish for salmon with a legitimate chance to catch in the month of July at some point. I know there's a lot of a lot of issues with that. It's a very impactful time on those Stiligwamish fish, but in July, the Coho in Marine Area 10 are still pretty small. Those resident Coho, it's fun for a couple times, but they're still pretty small in July. And with how it's currently proposed, the second half of July in Area 10, the Kings just aren't in yet. And I think it's, it's pretty sad that for Puget Sound anglers, the only option really to get salmon in July, beyond a 2-pound resident Coho, is to drive 4 hours out to, the strait. And I think that, if at all possible, one of Marine Area 7 or Marine Area 9 being open in that second half of July, and I'll put a big push for Marine Area 9 because Marine Area 7 is just, as we've seen, extremely, extremely costly. And I think that, tough decisions have to be made, But, personally, I love fishing Marine Area 7, but I'd rather trade, but end of August and September really is coho time. And there's a lot of coho around there. I'd rather just target coho then and use some of those impacts. That does save a significant amount of impacts, both wild and hatchery, on the Stilgomish fish. If we switch that to non-retention, and then that allows us to open up maybe more winter opportunity elsewhere. Thank you.
Thanks, Zachary. I see Henry's hand up again.
Yeah, on the Marine Area 7 derbies, I think in the past there was at least 3 and sometimes 4. And I think in 2019 there was one every weekend from like mid-January through first or second week of February. There was one from Roach Harbor, Friday Harbor, Anacortes. I thought there might have been another one. So, just in response to that prior comment, on that point, does WDFW have the option of denying a permit for a derby organizer? Because it seems like, when we're, kind of in crisis mode as far as preserving fisheries, that's a tool they can use for managing the pressure and impacts there.
Well, I guess this is as good a time as any to speak to the hole that's in state law and in our management around derbies. Currently, the way the laws are set up, you are required to have a permit for a game fish derby, but you are not required to have a permit for a food fish derby. So the way the state classifies food fish, game fish are more steelhead or trout or your warm water species. Food fish are halibut, salmon. So currently the state has, we have no laws on the books that require us to permit those food fish derbies or provide a way to deny them, I guess, in essence. We've really danced around this one for a while. We also understand that a lot of the Puget Sound angler chapters over the years have really relied on those derbies for fundraising events that do a lot of great work in communities, promoting fishing efforts and other things like that. So I think, I totally understand the desire or maybe the intention of trying to limit those. I do think it's something that the department could and should consider into the future, but I also know there's a balance to everything. And I think, there's been less of a desire to put restrictions on those local angler chapters and their efforts to try to raise funds with their members. So we haven't really gone down that road as a consideration. And I know that's a better road than having quotas and limited numbers of impacts eaten up by large fishing derbies. But as I said, that's a balance. And I think we'd be interested in trying to craft something that makes sense for, both the angling chapters and the angling community, as well as kind of the larger needs for everybody.
Yeah, from, for Bellingham Puget Sound anglers, we canceled our derby, a few years ago when, we saw the quotas got so small in the summer. Our concern was that having, a whole bunch of people show up to fish the derby was going to cut the season short for everybody. And so we haven't had a derby up here since, I think, 2018. I don't know what other organizations are doing when they look at their, at holding their derbies and comparing to their quotas, but we've had such a small summer quota up here that we just haven't felt that we could even have a derby.
Yeah, and I think in the recent past, it's definitely been more catered towards coho opportunity, less restrictive kind of in-season obligations on coho, so that ability. But we've also had pretty depressed coho runs in the recent past too, so that's made those opportunities challenging as well.
Since you brought up coho, why is Area 7 going to mark selective instead of non-selective?
Well, I think as I'm looking at it from a manager standpoint, the department missed pretty badly in 2019 and 2020 with our preseason modeling inputs and our estimates of what that coho opportunity would look like in 7. I think a lot of that was we weren't anticipating the Chinook closures and that effects on coho. So when we've done postseason modeling evaluations of what those impacts from various fisheries are, Area 7 was a heavy hitter on both Thompson stocks, Skagit stocks, I believe were the two biggest ones that caused some overages in both 2019 and 2020. I don't have those specific numbers in front of me, but I think that's what caused us. And also just looking at the Thompson numbers from this year, and we're anticipating because of what happened in Area 7 last year, we're expecting pretty decent effort towards coho. I don't think we have room on the Thompson impacts in the Canadian stock to allow for a non-marked selective fishery this year.
Yeah, it just seems like when we are marked selective on the coho, there's a lot of release mortalities on those, compared to Chinook. And, I know last year was the first year in a long time I had to go out to CQ to do any fishing. And we finally gave up because we caught so many, wild coho, and, they're next to the boat thrashing and wrapping in line and, just beating themselves up. We gave up and left, and I have concern that marked selective fishing, for coho up there is going to have a high impact on those wild fish.
Right, next I see Alex's hand up. Before I get to you, Alex, Rodney, I see that your hand is still raised. So if you have a question, I can get to that one next. If not, you can just put your hand down. Alex, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to shed some light on the department's reasoning for the potential overharvest last year has been cited several times because of the July 4th holiday. However, we've seen the July 4th holiday on that opening weekend for 2020 and for 2019, and we didn't see any overharvest in either of those 2 years. So I question that to an extent. And then with that in mind, are we not accounting for that there just might be an abundance of hatchery fish during that time? So if we move this fishery farther back into the year, as proposed, we're looking at the second half of August and into September. Is the department not concerned with with a heightened interaction with non-marked Chinook during that time period? I'll take that one first.
All those things go into consideration, Alex, as we're trying to consider seasons and opportunity. There's lots of things that we consider when we go forward. Your point about abundance, though, we don't have any way of evaluating what the abundances are in season in any of our marine areas in Puget Sound. So what we're operating off of is preseason predictions of abundance, and we don't really know what those are until the fishery's already ended. So there's not a really good way for us to evaluate whether or not those fish are going to be there in season.
I would say there's probably definitely at least one way, and that would be to have a test fishery there during the time.
But a test fishery isn't going to give us an abundance in the Straits and San Juan Islands. One single test boat is not going to give us that information, Alex.
Well, data is data. I would just also say that when we refer to this fishery having extra pressure because of a July 4th weekend, it needs to be considered that that's been the case for the last 3 years, and only last year did we run into this scenario.
So I might be able to add a little bit more to that. So no, test fishing will not get you abundance because abundance needs to be done in a kind of as a fishery independent sample, and test fishing is a fishery dependent sample. So it's not going to give you abundance estimates at all. We currently don't have a way of doing that in season in the marine area. There was also significantly higher effort in Area 7 during those opening days. That first week, there was nearly twice as much effort as we've seen in the past. And there was, I believe it was like nearly twice as many fish that were sampled at the dock by the creelers during that time period. And I'm checking in with some of the PSSU folks right now just to make sure. But there was, significantly more fish that were physically sampled. So a lot of that had to do with a really high effort, and whether that was COVID fatigue and people just getting out there, really great weather, just all those things combined. A lot of that, what happened in Area 7 was just due to that really, really high effort that we saw for those first couple of days. So hopefully that helps to clarify that a little bit as well. So next I see Paul's hand up. Paul, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just maybe to make a comment on what Alex was talking about, while I understand and can appreciate that, every year might be a little bit different, it still seems to me that we all can know what the basic trends are in abundance in any given area at any given time. And I think that does need to be taken into account when seasons are set. Now, to my point, and I know this was brought up on Monday, but I want to dig into it a little bit more because I think myself and maybe some others weren't quite satisfied with, the response. And this has to do with the very, very explosive growth of pinnipeds that we know have been just devastating salmon populations for many years now. I know you guys are just as aware of the numbers as I am with seals and California sea lions, astronomical numbers that are just taking out a lot of salmon, especially younger salmon. And so basically our hatcheries efforts have been doing a lot to feed these guys. And we certainly want to see some changes to that. That being said, we also understand the constraints set forth by the Marine Mammal Protection Act. But my thing is, it's concerning to me that these salmonoid mortalities have been tolerated at these levels as long as they have. There have been several studies out, that can be read about the impact of the sea lions and seals populations and how much salmon that they are actually taking. And we appreciate some of the direction in the past from the state to collect more information. But the feeling is that we need immediate action to preserve our salmon stocks. It seems like right now we're in damage control mode. You guys put in a lot of effort. That spreadsheet is magic, and how much work you put into that just to try to save a few fish on the river. I run a business, and when we're in damage control mode and I talk to my managers, I tell them, look, we're chasing our tail because we're not hitting the real issues here. And I feel like sometimes with this issue, all the work that goes into managing these seasons, we are chasing our tail instead of dealing with the real issues, the real things that will make a difference in preserving our salmon stocks. And we know that the amount of salmon that anglers take in the Puget Sound area is a small fraction of what these pinnipeds are taking. And I'm not saying get rid of all pinnipeds, but the populations have got to be significantly reduced instead of our seasons, which we've seen in the last 40 years, reduced by 90% or more as a strategy, which has not really worked. We've seen that it's not worked. I understand that we're dealing with NOAA, we're dealing with, the MMPA, but what can Wdfw, what can the state of Washington do to aggressively pursue this? If it means going to court, if it means working with NOAA to change the language in the MMPA to be able to accommodate what they did not foresee when this thing was put together, which was an overabundance of predators that are taking out another endangered species. And I can appreciate a couple more people getting hired, gathering more information, but it seems to me we are at the point where we need action now. So if you could comment on that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, Paul, I totally appreciate all your words, and I don't disagree with you one bit. The reality of the situation is we have no authority and we have no power in this situation. We have been working with NOAA. We work closely with them on monitoring and evaluation and moving things forward. But when it comes to MMPA and our abilities to actually call animals, we have none. So, I mean, you know, we're still working on that. The wildlife program has expanded their team of marine mammal folks to work closely with NOAA. We've expanded those evaluation efforts both in Puget Sound and on the Columbia River. I think we acknowledge it's a problem and agree with it, but you know, at the end of the day, we have no power or control over how this situation goes forward. We can only try to push it from our end with NOAA, as you stated. So.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. I guess what I'm asking for is more aggressive action on part of the state. I realize you can't just decide to go out and take out half the population. I do understand that. However, I do not feel that all avenues have been explored, even as far as lawsuits to take back control of Puget Sound and just the explosion of pinnipeds that are out there. I get it that, you know, we're talking, we're gathering information, but I just don't feel it's enough. And I would think that, you know, we've seen lawsuits from the other side, when people are worried about this or that species, you know, becoming endangered. And we know there are activist groups out there that have spent a lot of time and money, you know, trying to protect those groups. Why can't we employ some of the same tactics, you know, to deal a little more toughly with NOAA and this restrictive MMPA that is keeping us from doing what needs to be done? That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Thanks, Paul. And I guess my only response before we go to Mr. Patillo is that our agency is not an activist agency, and we're not entering into litigation against the federal government is not high on our priority list. Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you. Get back to fisheries proposals, the focus of today's meeting. I wanted to offer another alternative for Area 7. I propose that you look at a August 1 to September 5 Chinook season. And I want to make sure that you're also looking at some alternatives that have been discussed and used, and that is limiting the days per week. This proposal would address the strong interest by the public in having some fishing in July and providing opportunity earlier, or really extending the season over a broader time period. And so just to cut to the chase, what I'm proposing is a July 16 opener through September 5th. So to kind of couple with the other proposal that I made of August 1 to September 5, but have it open Thursday through Saturday only, at least from the start. Now this is modeled after what I think was quite a successful and innovative approach to the problem this winter with Area 10, where we went with Thursday through Saturday after opening it right away and seeing too many high rate of catch. Not to compare those two fisheries directly, but more broadly, the Director Suslin asked the public to be innovative and thinking about ways to manage our fisheries differently, and addressing the problems of Area 7 was one of the specific examples used. And days per week did seem like a reasonable approach. It's not what everybody likes. We'll fight over what days if you had 3 days, but weekends and weekdays, etc. But it's a straightforward proposal, and it, I believe, would offer also the additional benefit of having a open and closed the fishery and time for the department staff to evaluate a more slower progress of a fishery. And I think there is a management benefit to that approach. So let me just offer that. And then if you would allow me just a couple of other comments about, one is about, because there was discussion about selective fisheries. There's no doubt about that selective fisheries are a documented success. We've done it for a long time, and it really is successful at reducing the impact on unmarked fish and giving us an opportunity where there are large numbers of harvestable hatchery fish, and there certainly are more of those than wild fish. It's also very costly, and we get that we have to do more sampling to collect the information that are needed for making estimates of the impact on our fish. So we don't like to do it. We would prefer to have non-selective fishing, and so I'm getting at the issue of the people's interest in having non-selective fishing for coho in the late time frame, because it doesn't always fit. And one of the places where anglers are unhappy, as was expressed by one of the callers today, was where you have seasons with low mark rates. We should try to avoid those. Well, okay, so maybe as Mark, you had represented, there's some fear about the potential in Area 7 late season, but at least in Area 5, maybe even Area 6, the September fishing, it's particularly the latter part. I wonder if we could see an estimate of, just for comparison, of a non-selective September and a selective September in either one of those areas, just for to show people what the savings are, the comparable impacts on the key wild stocks such as Interior Fraser, Thompson, and Strait of Juan de Fuca, or even Hood Canal this year. That I think would be good information. And it also is valuable for Puget Sound fisheries to contrast with alternatives that are presented for the ocean fisheries between options 1, 2, and 3. There's about a 1% difference, which is big for Interior Fraser. I think that's the slide that you presented. And that's a pretty dramatic difference between those. So if we're trying to minimize the impact, well, yeah, you don't need to run the models. It probably means a selective fishery in the Puget Sound areas. But if it really means let's minimize the fisheries, then it probably means option, is it 3, the lowest option in the ocean. It's not as simple as that, but modeling selective versus non-selective for a case example like Area 5 in September, I think would be informative for the public. Thank you very much.
So thanks, Pat. I appreciate those comments, and something that I've been thinking about as we're kind of continuing this discussion, and I just want to throw this out for the group to consider as we're, just tossing around fisheries ideas as we all try to work towards centering in on, kind of the best season we can put forward collectively. Looking at the calendar, July 16th is a Saturday. So thinking about the proposal going forward, if we were to think about aligning, 7 and 9 with short day openers, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that we'd probably want to open, the 14th and do a 14th, 15th, 16th, and then have a closure. But I guess I'm just throwing that out as trying to build on Pat's suggestion and think about how we, taking some other suggestions in mind about aligning areas 7 and 9. That could be an option that we could consider. And I'd like some feedback about that if that's something folks would be interested in. So I see Carl's next. Go ahead, Carl.
Thanks, Mark. And yeah, thank you for the comments, everyone, today. I hear a lot of concern from, Area 7 folks up there about getting a season, and I can understand why. I hear maybe some mistrust with folks about how the department is calculating that fishery, but we all know it was an incredible amount of effort, and it's pretty obvious that the department has made some pretty bold considerations in order to or in an attempt to provide some meaningful opportunity in Marine Area 7. So hopefully those stakeholders appreciate that. Our concern in the Central South Sound is more around areas 9 and 10, and the department had to plug in some bigger numbers in order to hopefully accommodate a more meaningful season in Area 7, and some of those numbers had to come from someplace, and some of that looks like it might be Marine Area 10, and at the cost of any potential restoration of Area 9 winter fishery is also so. That's also part of how you were able to, propose some winter fishing in 7, I believe. And so hopefully folks up there appreciate that. I'm looking at the first tool that we looked at with the advisors, and I see a performance adjustment there for the full January through March winter fishery that was there last year. And it bumps up the numbers a bit. If I move my cursor around here, I can see a little better. Oh, darn it. So when you turned that to a March only fishery, I saw a savings of, 0.06 and 0.04 respectively on marked and unmarked stilly fish. So that kind of jumped out at me as seeing, cutting a winter fishery by 2/3 to save 0.6 unmarked stilly fish. I a little bit of a hard time processing that and accepting it. I saw in the tool you had today, you did have a checkbox for modeling February and March, and to tag on to Pat's comments about the success of this winter's fishery in Marine Area 10 by having a 7-day-a-week proposal in the loaf, but monitoring it carefully and starting cautiously at 3 days a week seemed pretty effective, and then opening it to 7 days a week if and when additional or adequate quota still remained to finish off that fishery. I thought that was a great strategy. We get in a box with a 1-month fishery in Area 10, we won't be able to utilize that successful tool that we've stumbled across. So, I still encourage a run at February and March in the winter in Marine Area 10, particularly if we have to adjust our summer numbers down, or of course, us at the Charter Boat Association, we are more concerned with time on the water than we are with the size of our summer Chinook quota. But that we can't speak for the entire fleet. I know summer kings are important to some folks. But that would be, as far as proposals for fisheries, that would probably be pretty high for us, would be looking at February and March and 10, even if we had to not use the performance adjuster and plug in a lower number and then start with that cautious approach of 3 days a week, at least we would have the potential for running that a couple months, even if it stayed at that 3 days a week. And then my other comment would be on the, Area 10 in the summer. I'm aware that, almost a year ago, we had all of June in Area 10 for Coho in the summer, and it was modeled and passing the test, but we ended up bumping it out to June 16th opener, primarily as a a policy decision to get agreement. I mean, frankly, was, this is what the co-managers wanted. And I think they may have had some current concerns about Chinook bycatch, some S River Coho concerns. I think those S River Coho are, we still have that 50,000 goal for the Snohomish, which is pretty lofty, and we're not going to make that. But the northern rivers are mostly pretty good on Coho. I guess we have concern about the South Sound, but I don't know if you can comment if there's any potential to look at June 1st again in Marine Area 10. I know it's an impossible task. You guys are getting nothing but requests to increase fisheries, yet we have to meet conservation objectives. But yeah, it's the nature of the beast. Those are my comments for now. Thank you for your time.
And maybe I'll just, go ahead, Derek, you first.
Oh, I was just going to highlight, and you'd probably seen in the modeling tool, we did take a look at June 1st opener in Area 10, if you want to see what those impacts were, Carl. I wanted to kind of confirm some of the pieces that you'd said earlier. Area 10 in the winter does have Stillaguamish impacts, and that was something that we were considering as we were looking at changes for this year, but also, as you highlighted, they're lower than we see in many of the other marine areas. We had incorporated in that tool, we had incorporated February and March just from some of the public feedback that we'd heard. And that's definitely maybe a consideration there as we move forward in the modeling. And sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You didn't cut me off. You didn't cut me off at all, Derek. I guess I just wanted to talk to Carl a little bit about Coho in June. And the history there, Carl, I guess. In some of our discussions with the tribes this year, they have raised concerns about Coho and, impacts on the smaller size resident Coho or other Coho that we encounter in Area 10 in June. And obviously, we've seen that increase pretty dramatically in the recent years. I think the popularity, I think, of just having that time and opportunity, as someone stated earlier, when there is no other opportunity, I think had a lot to do with that effort that we saw directed at that fishery. I guess my feelings on this are shared with kind of you and Keith and others, that if I think it's a great opportunity to consider or keep considering catch and release fisheries for that time period if the tribes are really concerned about Coho. I guess if they're going to try to whittle that down as a season, that would be my counter proposal. Is we have monitoring programs in place. Let's just go back to a catch and release fishery rather than a full closure. So that's how I'm thinking about approaching that. And again, we know the sensitivity around catch and release fisheries with our co-managers. I'm not looking to create more difficulties for us or bumps in the road as we try to finalize a package for this year. But I do recognize the importance of those catch and release opportunities, and at least trying to have some time, even if it's not a directed harvest opportunity, to at least allow some time in that kind of early summer time period. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, we would support that. Obviously, Coho fishery is better for the general public, but we are always in favor of any small catch and release opportunity that we can get some data for the future.
I see Todd's hand up next. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize if all the Area 7 guys are taking up a lot of the time here. First, I want to say that I think Patrick's proposal sounded pretty good to me. So he's gets a thumbs up for me. That seems like a pretty good idea. But I did want to back up a little bit to the quick discussion we had on the Bellingham Bay fishery, as it takes advantage of the Samish fish hatchery. And there's a lot of clipped fish there. And I wanted to propose or ask if it was possible to include Bellingham Channel in there. If you think about where that is, a lot of the fish stack up both in Bellingham Channel and off of Bellingham Bay. And it's far enough inside the San Juans where you don't get many transient fish, and it's a little bit later in the season when those fish tend to show up. It would be a good way to take advantage of that fish run and not endanger or impact any other fish, at least minimize the impact if you do that. Just some thoughts. Is that even possible?
So I'm trying to think of my my NOAA charts and the map and where these things are. I mean, there's reasons why we have those early season closures in and around Bellingham Bay and that area, and that's primarily to protect the Nooksack spring Chinook that are returning. So and that's primarily why we have the later August start date, is to try to make sure that we're protecting those fish that are headed back to the Nooksack. So kind of earlier openings in and around that area are probably not on the table.
Yeah, and I wouldn't propose an earlier opening. It would be just the same, but just expanded. And so Bellingham Channel is south of that area. If you think of Guimas Channel and Guimas Island, it's just the west side of Guimas Island there. And that's where a lot of those fish tend to stack up in the area in that channel in there. And when it has been open in the past, it's been really good. Late season, there's a lot of fish there. Almost all of them are clipped, which is great. Again, really good fishing. And my guess is when you go that far, what I want to say, east, close enough to the Samish River inside the San Juan Islands, you could probably optimize catching those Samish River fish without catching any others. And again, I wouldn't propose to do it earlier. I just say keep the existing late season for the Samish Bay, just include, or the Bellingham Bay, just include Bellingham Channel.
Thanks, Todd.
Yep, thanks for listening.
Alex, go ahead.
Mark, thank you for kind of taking that moment to throw out that potential scenario. I agree. I think that it's shown that a Thursday or a short day opener has shown its effectiveness on being able to manage in season. I don't think it would be anybody on this call's number one choice, but if we're looking at a way to salvage some sort of July opportunity in both 9 and 7, and if it makes sense to meet objectives, if we could model for that, that would be something that I would definitely endorse in just pure light of giving us July opportunity. So I just wanted to give you a comment on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Henry, go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up on that Bellingham Bay, the geography that we're talking about there, it's that channel between Guimas Island and Cypress Island. And I understand the concern for the the spring Nooksack Chinook, and in the past, like that whole Bellingham Bay area has closed off, I think on March 1 through August 15. To protect those fish. Now, someone earlier said that the Samish run Chinook are a little bit of a later stock, and I have no idea. You guys are the experts on that. But if that is the case, and we're worried about very early Nooksack Chinook, then it would make sense that we could expand that Bellingham Bay area later on. Maybe it is a September 1, you go to an expanded area that includes that, what's known as the Bellingham Channel. I think that you get some positive feedback there. And then, I don't know if those fish are still in the salt water later, like into, October, but I think some of the Nooksack Coho are, and there's a good projection for those fish. And so, if it's possible to expand that Bellingham Bay bubble into October, that would be appreciated as well. And then I had 2 other comments. I got a text message from someone who was unable to raise their hand, and it's on the releasing Coho, and the comment was that there's so many people in the water that are unable to properly release a fish that, he thinks that if Coho was, 2 fish and you're done, either or, marked or unmarked, especially when we have, when there's a lot of them around, he thinks that there'd be fewer impacts. And then one final thing that we haven't discussed at all is I don't know how our quotas are allocated between recreational and commercial. And I don't know if is it 50-50 or, I know in like shrimp, it's gone more recreational. But we do see in when the fisheries, the list of agreed fisheries comes out, a lot of people look at the commercial quotas on on impacts for wild fish. And there's always this thing that says like, after a certain number of fish, then they can't sell them anymore and have to start releasing them. I'd like to hear a little bit about, how those allocations are made and the decisions regarding, allowing them to retain or versus release, marked fish in some of I think it's like usually they're in the sockeye and pink and coho fisheries.
So we get our guidance on kind of those species allocations through the Fish and Wildlife Commission's North of Falcon policy. So through that policy, the commission has prioritized Chinook for recreational fisheries. That doesn't mean commercial fisheries get no Chinook. It just means that when we're crafting fisheries packages, recreational fisheries get the priority. So specifically for those kind of greater San Juan Island area commercial fisheries that you're talking about, the state's fisheries are with two types of commercial gear, purse seine gear and gill net gear. There's a third gear that you guys are probably familiar with up in the San Juans. That's reef net gear, which is basically fixed gear. And that's probably the most selective commercial fishing gear we have is reef net gear. So when we prosecute commercial fisheries in the San Juans for pink or for sockeye, we have release requirements in purse seine fisheries and live box requirements as well. So they're required to braille those purse seine catches in smaller batches. They're required to get those Chinook they catch in live boxes, and live release is also required in those fisheries. The gill net fleet fishes in some different areas. Their impacts on kind of non-target stocks are different. And we do account for those impacts or projected impacts in our in-season modeling. We have closed commercial fisheries due to kind of overages on expected impacts of stocks of concern like Chinook in the past. So we do have onboard observers as part of those fisheries as well, where we're monitoring catches. Now, granted, just like we don't catch every recreational boat, we don't have boots on every commercial fishing boat, but we do have a boat that drives around and monitors catches, as well as drops observers on and off boats throughout the day on different boats, so we can get a larger sampling of the fleet and their impacts there. And we do assess those in season, make adjustments to opportunities, or like I said, even close if we're getting right at our expected impacts though there. So
the live box, and the other release requirements, are those equally applicable to tribal and non-tribal, commercial? And the only reason I bring it up is, last summer along Lummi Island, we saw the seine fleet, netting the pinks, and saw fish, being released from the deck of those boats, and the release method could be described as a boomerang toss, and it was really concerning to me.
Yep. So no, the tribal commercial fleet doesn't have the same requirements that we do. They model those impacts in their fisheries, or expected impacts in their fisheries, and they may have release requirements. And again, there may have been commercial fishing boats who are participating from our side that weren't releasing them appropriately. But we do try to make sure that we're providing that. Those fish are also, or those fishermen, I guess, sorry, are also required to do fish friendly certification for commercial fisheries. So thanks for that info. I mean, we're expanding our commercial observer program this year to get more boots on boats, I guess, in our commercial fisheries this year. So we'll make sure that if we do have opportunities for sockeye in the San Juans this summer, that we have plenty of people on the boats to be able to capture that.
Thanks. I just want to clarify, I'm not pointing a finger at tribal versus non-tribal. I have no idea whose boats they were. It was just
Gotcha.
things I observed. So thank you very much.
Yep. I think Charles is next.
This is kind of for the two doctors. First, Dr. Simonson, have enough data points come in to evaluate the effectiveness or the exclusiveness of large profile? And Dr. Dapp, is a 3-day-a-week season doing it in 3 days, does that give you enough time to do in-season updates to sort of throttle things? I know that in the past it's been turn it on and then it's all done, but throttling up and down like we did this year with the Area 10 blackmouth, I think worked out exceptionally well. At least from my experience, the lack of impacts per legal fish did go indeed way up. So Dr. Simonson, have you got any data?
So I'm assuming you're talking about, when you say large profile, I'm assuming you're talking about gear. Are you referring to the gear
Correct.
study? All right, yeah. So we still have the gear studies ongoing. As most of you probably know, we started the gear study in about February of last year. And so we are kind of moving into the second year of it. What we are starting to see some trends, but there's a lot of kind of confounding information in there in terms of spatial distribution of points, in terms of different marine areas. There's also some temporal trends that I'm still trying to evaluate between summer and winter fisheries. So what I'm trying to do is, as we kind of move this gear study forward and we're kind of collecting more intense data throughout all the marine areas, February of last year when we started it was just Area 10 because that's the only fishery that was open at the time. And then when it closed down, we kind of continued the gear study with the test fishers. The winter fishery this year, we have some data from Area 11 in November, and then we have the Area 10 winter fishery that has been going on now. So we kind of have those, just a couple of areas for winter. The summer was obviously more spatially diverse, but there's still a lot of things that we need to kind of work out there. What the plan is for that is to kind of continue the study through this summer. So that gives us 2 full years of summer and 2 full years of winter data. And then the plan is to kind of go back and do a more thorough evaluation of all those data that have been collected thus far. And I think we're planning on putting together a small white paper to kind of present to co-managers, and then something that would be available for public as well to kind of go through all those things. So we don't have any plans right now to make any management decisions using gear. Like there's no gear restrictions that are in the works. It's something that we've been talking about internally. It's something that we've kind of reached out to some industry folks and some other people that we know. And we've, kind of had those conversations, just kind of, just making sure that we're gauging all the proper parties that would be involved in making such a decision like that. But we're not prepared to do that right now. We are going to continue to examine those data points, and hopefully we'll have a bit more information by the fall to kind of like actually have something to report that makes sense. We really wanted that 2 full years of data collection to kind of get at some of that information. So that's the first part. The second part, I'm trying to remember exactly. The 3 days a week and whether or not that was good for in-season management. Yes. So as you can imagine, we kind of, as data are being collected throughout the fishery, it's kind of divided. And somebody from the sampling unit, I know some of you guys are on, can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of divided into weekday and weekend, how it's broken up, and that just kind of has to do with the amount of fishing effort that's happening and kind of how that's divided. So there's always a little bit of a delay after like a weekend has finished up as to when those data points come in and then when those estimates can be calculated. As you can imagine, when you have a 7-day-a-week fishery, as numbers are coming in, fishing is still occurring. So there could be some delays if we need to take an in-season action. So that's a long way of getting at your question by saying that if we had a 3-day-a-week opener, yes, we would have efficient time to kind of collect that information and get those estimates calculated before the next weekend opener. And that's kind kind of what happened this year with Area 10 in the winter is we were able to kind of open it for a short period, assess the data during that closed period, and then, be able to kind of really make an informed decision going into the next weekend. So hope that answers your question. And if there's anything else, let me know.
Do you have adequate funds to have, like airplanes? I know you're running a full Murphy. I'm assuming that's the plan for the summer, no matter what. But are you able to really effectively monitor the effort at all times? Because, you've got a limited number of test boats, and I think you've got that one research vessel, but are you able to really effectively hit all the marinas so that you've got a good idea of the effort that's going out?
So I'll tackle this one, Kirsten. So depending on what the marine area looks like and what our monitoring efforts are, kind of dictates how intensive we are. So we do use flights for airplane boat counts for effort in the San Juan Island area and Marine Area 6 currently for summer fisheries. So essentially, it's almost like its own separate mark recapture study. We're counting boats in a certain time period out on the water, and then when folks get interviewed back on the dock, we ask them when they were actually had lines in, lines out, rather than just kind of transiting in the area. And we're able to basically correlate how many folks are coming back to our sample sites and if they were captured within our flight sample out on the water. So we do have adequate coverage on docks. So you said marinas. Be real clear, we don't have access to private marinas or private docks anywhere in Puget Sound unless we have agreements with those private marinas. Mostly where we target our sampling and monitoring efforts are public docks, publicly available places.
Okay, great. Has there been any effort to more along the lines of mandate STRs? Is that an option, just to get the information and make your data more accurate?
So I would say we're not mandating them right now, but we're actually are in the process of starting a campaign with public affairs to kind of get the information out there to collect more. We want to kind of boost that program. And we want to encourage folks to do that more. We've definitely started putting the word out there, and we've collected more STRs in recent history, I would say, than we had previously. But that's one of the things that we're going to work on before the summer really kicks in, is working with PA and kind of getting a lot more information out there, kind of an educational program, just basically informing the public how those are used, why they're helpful, and just kind of making sure that people understand that it's a good option for helping to manage the fisheries. So thanks for that comment. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Was there a reason why the top lines in, lines out wasn't included in the online stuff? Just more data?
We don't do that in every marine area. We only do it in marine areas where there's flights. The other marine areas, we use boat-based effort counts, where we have boats out on the water, counting boats and interviewing anglers where they're going to return to at the end of the day.
Okay, I guess the last question is, there's an arbitrary cutoff under 21, over 21. Is there in effect additional or less impact in handling an 8 to 10 or 12 inch juvenile coho or juvenile chinook over a 21 inch or 20 inch?
Not currently in any of the modeling, and I saw Derek popped his mic off, so go ahead.
I just wanted to say, yeah, as far as handling practices go, those we don't model those specifically, but we do model different release mortalities for Chinook for sublegal sized fish versus legal sized fish. That release mortality is 10% for legal sized fish and 20% for sublegal sized fish.
So but it's not graduated down, so it wouldn't make a difference if it was 8 inches or 20 inches, for instance. They both get the same impact.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Nelson's next. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to weigh in. To Kirsten's STR point, I would certainly enjoy the opportunity to help promote that and get more, I realize more data is definitely going to help us do a more efficient job of managing our fisheries. I stand in strong support to Pat Patilla's suggestion, and Mark, to your suggestion, which was quite helpful with regard to the 14th opener, in other words, the July 14 opener. And I'd point out the obvious point too, that if we did open 9 and 7 concurrently, we're spreading out pressure, whereas neither of the current season proposals right now would have the same date. There's a lot of crossover between 9 and 7 with regard to angler effort. And if we did open both of these areas on the same date, we would indeed have the benefit of spreading out that pressure. It's probably something you guys have already considered, but it bears stating. And Mark, you asked for input on that suggestion of 14th, and I would strongly support that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. And yeah, once we get that the information from PA, we can reach out for your support on that. Appreciate that. I see Robert's hand up next. Go ahead.
Hey, just a couple questions. Ms. Simonson, on your gear study, is the use of bait and non-bait part of that study?
So we are including that information because there are some areas where the test fishers are using bait. So I have included that information, but I don't really have as much to report about the difference between bait and size of fish and non-bait and size of fish. That's one of the things I'm planning on looking at as we are getting more of this information in over the next little while. So the other thing that I included as part of the gear study was hook size. And so we were looking at the actual hook size, anticipating that would actually be a pretty big factor in what we were catching. And it actually turned out that hook size is not nearly as important as actual gear size. So I don't know how different kind of like a mooching technique or just like a trolling with bait technique would change what we're seeing, in comparison to like, a plug or a spoon or something like that, if that makes sense. So yes, this is another long way of saying that, yes, I have looked at it. I have included it. I don't have a really good breakdown of it right now, but I'm planning on looking at that more closely in this off season right now. So yeah.
And then the next question is, in your freeling of anglers, is that question asked of them as if it was caught on bait versus no bait?
So right now, I don't believe it's asked, but we are going to kind of do a secondary survey to kind of get at that. We really want to have some more information about what the fleet is using in terms of gear. And so that we can kind of incorporate that both into our test fishing and also kind of be able to kind of inform, what we're seeing. So if we were to imply a gear restriction in the future, kind of how, basically what that effect would be once we have more information on what the fleet is actually using. So there might be some more information coming out. We're going to start looking into that. A couple of us have kind of put our heads together to kind of see how we can get a survey going, and whether that's kind of an additional question that's asked by the creelers or something we put on the website that we invite people to come in and comment on. We're still kind of working out those details. Mark, do you want to add anything to that, or?
No, Kirsten, I think we just have identified that there's a need for the department to better understand gear choices by the fleet. And so as Kirsten mentioned, we're developing plans for kind of a secondary survey. I think we're looking at it as a multi-pronged approach and potentially to include freshwater fisheries as well. So we're, as Kirsten said, this has just kind of been hatched in the last month as we've been in the middle of North of Falcon, and we've had some other discussions. This is kind of risen to the top on our plates as something that we're interested in getting off the ground and in place prior to the summer fisheries starting. So I would expect that we're going to be working closely with folks in industry and public affairs to get that study going here in the next little while. And it'll probably be going on for a while, just to make sure that we're being, as comprehensive as we can and gathering as much information as we can, and I've said this before, we know that anglers make different gear choices about where they're fishing and what they're fishing for. And we know that different areas fish different. So I think this is kind of step one in us trying to better understand the differences between marine areas and how that may equate to potential seasons or impacts into the future. So.
Good. Yeah, I would think that modeling the use of bait or no bait, if that would have any modeling effects and what that would do to seasons down the road. So glad you're looking at that. Thanks.
So I don't know if it would actually be a modeling component. It's kind of hard to model that. So in terms of, based on the stuff that Derek has been talking about, but I think it would be more used as like an in-season management tool versus just how you would model, how you would model impacts, basically, if that makes sense. So, but yeah, thank you for that question. I see Dan's hand up is next. Dan, go ahead.
So thank you for this opportunity to speak. I also would like to throw my continued support behind the gear testing. I work at a local lure manufacturer and provided some photos of some different size lures and how they're sold to the public. Kind of illustrating the difficulty in creating a rule to restrict the gear choice. That what we call a 5-inch spoon is a wide variety of sizes, and it usually includes the length of the hook. But my retail experience in my prior life tells me that presenting this to the anglers in an educational format is the bigger challenge. And it is always better to challenge them to succeed than to dictate a restriction upon them. And from the manufacturer's point of view and the retail point of view, as you're planning this, a logo and perhaps a slogan of Shaker Safe or Washington Legal or something that can be added to the appropriate products as they go out to the fishermen to be easily identifiable will make this effort quite a bit easier.
I like that. Maybe we could do like a trending like hashtag Shaker Saver or something like that. I like it. I really appreciate those comments. And Dan, if you wouldn't mind, you could just shoot me a quick email as we're having these conversations going forward, because I think these conversations are going to continue. It would be good to get your opinion on some of those things. So if you could just shoot me a quick email, we'll make sure that if we have like a kind of a subgroup that kind of talks about these things, we can include you in that. But I do appreciate that. For the education piece, we have already started talking about that. We've reached out to a couple other folks that we know that are in the industry as well. And we're going to try to come up with some ways to kind of, first and foremost, before we would go to a restriction, is to have some kind of educational campaign of like, this is what we're seeing. Here's what the data indicates. Here's a way that you can help, hashtag Shaker Saver and kind of go from there. But, so anything that you recommend or things that you've seen that work, we'd certainly be willing to hear that. But yeah, that's definitely the education campaign is definitely in the works. Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, but yeah, we're there. We got you. I really appreciate that.
I would say among the sport fish advisors, there's already several of us that have worked together closely over the years.
Yeah, and I see Gabe Miller's hand is up. He's one of the folks that we've been talking to a lot about this too. So yeah, we've definitely been reaching out to the folks that we know that are in the industry that could help out with this issue. So I appreciate that.
Great, thank you.
I see Stanley's hand up next. Go ahead, Stanley.
I need to unmute yourself, Stanley. Gotcha.
Got me? Okay. So my question is in regards to the quotas. And I can see in the spreadsheet where you have the quotas for all the areas there. But the one thing I don't see anywhere is the sublegal encounter quotas and things of that nature. Is that available? Or because last year Area 10 got closed for it was like you're watching the encounter rate go up and the quota go up, and all of a sudden it went to like 1,000%, kind of the same in the Area 7, and we got shut down. So it'd be nice to know what we're facing in terms of that at the beginning of the process instead of after it's over. The second question I have, and I'll continue and then you can answer, is Elliott Bay creel reports. They're not segregated between Area 10 fish. When you go look at the creel reports, it just says they all come from Area 10. How does the Elliott Bay number of fish affect our Area 10 quota? And then the other one is all about the test fishery boat data and creel checks and how they correlate back to the actual punch card or catch card data that you really don't have available for last year because we haven't turned them in yet, right? So how does that correlate? And have you seen anything that says, yes, that's really a good thing there? So.
Do you want to go first, Derek?
I can take the first part. So just looking at kind of some of the modeled encounters in terms of all different types of breakouts, legals, sublegals, marked, unmarked. I have those available for us to look at here, Stanley. Based off kind of some of your questions, I was thinking you might be more interested in Marine Area 10.
Yes.
As you kind of had highlighted there. Marine Area 10 is one of those areas, particularly in the wintertime, where we tend to see greater sublegal impacts than in some of our other areas. And I think that reflects over here in kind of the number of encounters for a relatively low number of landings, 300 fish, which once again, this represents currently in the modeling just a single month season.
And that's yeah, right. That's the winter, right?
Exactly. This is the winter. You can see that for that 300 landed fish, the model's currently estimating 3,600 encounters, of which a pretty good portion of those are sublegal fish, 3,200 encounters approximately. I do think that, so if I could maybe jump to your second question, as far as kind of how we account for impacts in Elliott Bay, we do have separate sampling that occurs there, and we are producing a catch estimate for Elliott Bay that's separate to the main Marine Area 10. Both of those are creel-based estimates, to the best of my knowledge.
Well, I know because I fish Area 10, and generally when I talk to the fish checkers, they just say when you're fishing Elliott Bay, they record them as Area 10. You don't ever see anything reported back that says, "Oh, this is an Elliott Bay number." It's always Area 10 numbers.
So we, as Derek said, we do have separate sampling programs. We do have a separate code. When an angler says that they fished in Elliott Bay, the sampler records that code that's different than Area 10. So we could attempt to put separate estimates up on the website where we put those creel checks. But you know, it's really only been 1 or 2 weekends a year, and generally those catches in Elliott Bay are much lower than kind of the larger creel checks in Area 10.
Okay.
So, and maybe on the last piece of that, the estimates that we use for both Area 10 and Elliott Bay, all the sampling and monitoring and in-season estimates we do are actually much better estimates than our catch record card estimates. So we actually use those estimates as part of, you know, the modeling and evaluation. And when the catch record card folks publish their reports at the end of the year, they actually substitute our kind of creel-based in-season sampling and monitoring efforts. They use our final estimates of those seasons as substitutes for the actual catch record card estimates.
So which one's higher, your estimates or the catch record card?
Our estimates, I believe, are generally in line. I think it depends on the area and seasons. We do see variation over time, but I think the majority of areas where we've done comparisons of looking at catch record card versus what we get in our estimates, it's relatively similar.
So you don't see any big differences between actual catch record card data and your predictions?
So I want to make sure I'm clear. Some areas and some time periods, yes, we do. But in general, if we're looking at you know, kind of our big heavy hitter areas of Central Sound, the Straits, other places where we do in-season estimates, those do not vary wildly between the catch record card estimates and our in-season estimates.
Because I would think that the catch record card would be, I mean, that's actual data. That's not, you know, dreamed up data.
Gabe Miller is next.
Yeah, thanks. You got me there.
Gotcha.
I just wanted to throw my support behind the 3-day a week, starting the 14th concurrent and 7 and 9. I think that's a reasonable compromise and something that's worth supporting. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Gabe. Anthony is next. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yes, I have a question about Area 9. And if it's possible to get open again from the bridge north. It's currently closed to us.
I would say my immediate response to that is that's not likely in the cards, at least for the next 10 years. We, as part of an agreement with the Hood Canal tribes and through the management plan, we agreed there would be no pre-terminal fishing in that area until NOAA came to a decision on the Mid-Hood Canal stock, or we developed a different plan on how to deal with that stock going forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Go ahead, Ron. Ron Garner.
Thank you. Well, there's a lot of information flying out there today. Appreciate everybody's time, but we got 15 chapters all over, and kind of puts some of us at odds. Different areas open and other ones closing. And I've been hit up really hard on area 7 and 9 opening up, and I just got to say that we would support Patillo's idea of doing some short openings in July 16th, and I think, like Nellie said, it's probably a good idea to put them on the same time frame. But anyway, I just want to throw the support onto opening that July 16th, even if it's short. There's just so many people that every year have their vacations all set elsewhere, and it's just, we really need to try and focus on getting something in there. But that's about it.
Thank you, Ron. Kurt Kramer.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a couple observations and then a couple questions. It seems to me that the current modeling to create the opportunities in Hood Canal or on the San Juan Islands, Area 9 and Area 10 through the summer fishery in 9 and the winter fishery in 10 paid some of the price to support the San Juan Island fisheries. And I guess that's all good and well, but we're still, the fact remains, we're still looking at potentially another 12% cut in impacts. If those two areas have already paid some dues in that, then we're going to have to look at other areas probably to spread the pain across the boards. Just something to think about. And it'll be interesting to see what the modeling will be on the 3-day-a-week seasons and in the summer, and whether that increases or decreases the total impacts. Something to keep in mind: a 3-day season in the summer with the nice weather we typically have, basically you're going to have an opening day every week. And so the savings probably wouldn't be as much as, you probably wouldn't save half the impacts by going to 3-day a week, but it's a great idea to explore. We just have to be careful and aware of what's going on. Earlier, we had a discussion about, like that proposal is thinking outside the box. And the reality is, we're two forces are colliding. Or the Puget Sound anglers as a group is becoming more and more efficient over the decades. I've only been fishing, well, this is my 69th year fishing Puget Sound. So, but in that time period, we've gotten a lot more effective, better boats, better gear, better information. And so individually, we've become more effectively. At the same time, our Chinook populations are going to the toilet, and I don't see that that's reversing anytime soon. The information in the co-manager's management plan indicates that in at least 8 of the Puget Sound stocks since listing have had spawner recruit curve or points of less than 1. That means the fish on the spawning grounds are not replacing themselves prior to any fishing. It's hard to imagine we turn that around anytime soon. And so we may have to think even further outside the box. And I think we're reached the point to begin to have serious discussions about annual limits on Chinook, at least Puget Sound Chinook. We got more and more people chasing a shrinking piece of the pie. And that's, I realize that's not very popular with anybody, but we need to think about that. And finally, I'm, my obligated freshwater seasons. On the Stillaguamish, you mentioned several times in the last 2 weeks that the 2022 season will be the same as 2021. Well, in 2021, there was no salmon season in the Stillaguamish, and the game fish season didn't start until September 16th. I think folks were looking for something a little better than that, and your modeling shows something better than that. I don't know where the disconnect was, but there's been a disconnect. And it showed, the modeling showed that there was a two fish impact on the Coho season and the game fish seasons. I'm guessing we'd save one fish impact if you didn't have to round the impacts for those two fisheries. If you're looking for, and a fish might be important, and I would be very interested in getting that information on what the tribal Chinook impacts they're reserving for their Coho fisheries. It's hard to imagine that the recreational fishery would have larger encounters than the gillnet fishery. And the gillnet, they're charged, per co-manager agreements, they charge 100% mortality, and per co-manager agreement, the recreational fishery, freshwater fishery is only 10%. So whatever they're reserving, the recreational fishery should be seeing only about 1/10 of that. Anyway, thanks for your time.
Appreciate it, Kurt. Paul is next. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. I guess I'll put my plug in. I totally support the July 14th opener for both 7 and 9, 3-day-a-week fishery. I think might be a good compromise. So beyond that, many of us have seen the birth and struggle of the Fish Washington app, and it seems to have improved. However, have we considered using it as a more functional data collection tool? In other words, is there a reason why we couldn't do VTRs through that app? And also, similar to Canada's system, their NRLS system, could we not actually record our fish catches on that app? Seems to me that would give you more real-time data to work with, especially in real sensitive fisheries. Thank you.
So I will say that there is STR reporting is available online, and actually I'll just grab that off the website real quick. I'll put it in the chat so everybody has access to it, just to show you, so you guys all know where it is. But there is STR reporting that is available online. You can just kind of go on the website, put in your catch it, and submit it. Mark, I think I'll let you talk about any of the other electronic stuff that's going to come down the pipe.
So, and thanks for that, Paul. The original idea when that app was launched was that the STR would actually be a part of that. We've had, kind of some logistical and internal struggles with the app since its launch that we've been trying to work through. So we hadn't really felt like we had the ability to add to it at this point. But we just thanking our legislature again, they were very kind to us this year, did provide the agencies with some additional funding to continue and speed up development of an electronic catch record card system, of which, yes, all the electronic catch record card and licensing system. So all the things that you're talking about, I would say, are on super speed here for the next few years as we look to put all those pieces in place and start rollout and testing of that. Obviously, that's going to be a multi-year process as we transition from, paper licenses and paper catch record cards to more electronic system. But that is on the horizon, and hopefully we'll get it in place just as quick as we can. Chad is next with his hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I wanted to throw my support behind the 3 days a week season. That seems like a good idea. It seems to work. I also have a question on 8.1 and 8.2 Coho. Is there going to be a season up there? I didn't see anything on your list.
So currently the proposal for 8.1, I believe, is last year's August, September season. And I don't remember where we landed with the 8.2 season, but I believe it's early August through late September. Originally, we had it as a marked selective fishery, but after discussion with the tribes and further examination, we were considering a non-selective fishery in 8.2. But likely we're going to be in the smaller area south of the ferry lines that was in place last year for that 8.2 opportunity, primarily having to do with trying to get as many Snohomish fish back as we can.
Okay, but doesn't that south opening of the ferry line, I mean, that's getting all of the, I mean, you're impacting the Snohomish fish there. Wouldn't it make more sense to even, I mean, I guess I don't see the reason for the closure being there when those Snohomish fish have to pass through there. So why not bump it up even to Camino Head and give us the racetrack or something else, you know?
And that's totally a possibility, Chad, but it would likely mean less days on the water.
All right, thank you.
Alex has his hand up again. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so with what appears, I mean, we haven't heard an objection thus far to the short day openers in the simultaneous short day openers between 7 and 9. Derek, are we, and maybe are we beginning to try to find a way for us to model that? I mean, where are we at? How can we get that populated with what it would affect our management objectives in time for us to present something along those lines to the co-managers tomorrow?
So, and Derek, feel free to weigh in on this, Alex and others on the line. I'm looking upon the proposal for a short day opener less of a modeling exercise and more of a management tool that we can use to control effort and catch to a point to ensure, you know, a longer season. So I imagine if Derek's thinking about things from a modeling standpoint, we'd want to model, you know, kind of up to whatever we can fit in there for, you know, the most robust quota or encounters that we can for an expected season, you know, keeping the same methodologies in place that we've been using for inputs, but then be able to manage that potential season through short day openers or short openers to try to extend that through the whole time period.
Right, but wouldn't we need to present that in a manner in which that we were showing the ability to hit these management objectives?
Yep. But again, that just has less to do with modeling and more how we present it to the tribes.
Okay. And are we looking at this point now, Mark, that might be the direction you guys go tomorrow in tomorrow's meeting?
So we are going to take a different package proposal to the tribes. Obviously we've heard a lot of different ideas. This idea of short day openers, I think one is that we've heard a lot of people speak in favor of today. So I think it's definitely one that we're going to consider. Fish program leadership and agency leadership are listening in, or at least aware that we're going to have a discussion later today internally about what goes forward to the tribes and how we present that. But this has been a great conversation this week about these seasons, and we've gotten a ton of engagement, which has been great. So this is the process. This is what helps us try to center in on these seasons and get to a point where we put stuff in place. So
absolutely. Can either Dr. Simonson or Dr. Dapp, can either of you speak to how that potentially could benefit or could better assist in reaching those management objectives?
So Alex, I was intending to take kind of the approach that Mark had described there, where we would look and kind of see what impacts are available in the modeling. And I'm going to look at a few different scenarios as we run through how that modeling might look preliminarily, and acknowledging some of the comments from Kurt Kramer earlier. We are over where we need to be on Stilly. So at least in a preliminary look, what I might do is I might try to remain impact neutral from what we've got in the model, particularly for marine area 7 and 9. And then also maybe do a scenario where I look and see kind of what reduction in some of those quotas would cause us to get closer to that 67, 70 mark. kind of once again, a range of different options I might look at there. As I go through that, just as a reminder, when we model the July period open, and then kind of switch back to the later period being non-retention, that will result in a lower quota overall, just by the nature of us having to add those non-retention impacts back in. So kind of keeping that in mind, is that's something that I would expect to see as I'm going into the modeling.
Okay, now and then anyone else can speak to this, but I would think that if we're not going to get a potential July opener with a short term or short day opener, then that would not be something that I don't think we would all endorse. I think the efforts behind us, giving support for a short day opener in both 7 and 9, it would be that would be giving us the July opener. Now, I don't think that we would be in so much support of it if it came back and said, okay, we're going to go with short day openers, but it's still not going to be until the second half of August into September. Thank you.
And the other thing I just want to mention here, I mean, as I'm thinking about how this would work, we would do 3-day openers and close. We wouldn't stay open for Coho because we likely wouldn't have the non-retention impacts to be able to do that. I think we would try to run those at least until kind of the traditional early August, mid-August, before we would, go to total non-retention, or try to at least maximize that season through the 3-day openers until, we felt like there was enough Chinook impacts left to be able to prosecute those Coho openers for the rest of the season.
Okay, I want to make sure I just understood that really correctly there, Mark. So we would do a short day opener, 3-day opener, and we would do those 3-day openers indefinitely until we ran out of Chinook impacts left, and then we would eliminate our Coho opportunity.
So what I was saying is till we ran through the quota, essentially for each of those fisheries, both 7 and 9 have been run under a quota, right? So as in addition to that quota, we build in non-retention impacts when you're targeting Coho.
Correct.
I would say we would run those fisheries until we hit the quota, and we have a time period that we're expecting to fish Coho with non-retention impacts. That's probably August, September for both those areas. I want to make sure that we're allowing enough room to for those Coho fisheries to happen, and not be basically. I'm not interested, and I'm sure nobody else is interested in a repeat of what happened in 7 last year.
Absolutely.
Where we didn't have Coho opportunities because we blew past Chinook.
Absolutely.
So as I'm thinking about this, while we're targeting Chinook, it's best that we have those closure time periods in between openers. And then as we hit the end of the Chinook period, then we open it wide for Coho only retention with Chinook non-retention.
Because we can model it almost similar to what we did, I believe, in 2020, where we had an overall closure, and then we opened back up for Coho, and then we also got the additional 2 weeks of Chinook fisheries. So, I mean, I don't want us to get confused that we're going to get this 3-day potential. We're going to propose this short 3-day openers, and then in turn we're going to actually lose and have a result of the same magnitude of last year. So I appreciate you clarifying that.
I think Kurt was next.
Yeah, my bride and I were having the same discussion you and Derek were having about the non-retention. I mean, it's the only way to make that work at all and get the savings is to have some closure to probably all fishing in the days those 3 days, not just salmon fishing, but all fishing. And that would be one of the costs of that approach. And it's certainly a legitimate way to go, but we agree that's where you have to go. Thank you.
I hope you're not talking about crab, Kurt.
Well, we can be little forgiving in some things, right?
I wouldn't want to be the cause of a crab closure. Charles is next.
Thanks again. I'm not too knowledgeable about some stuff, and one of those is whether the models would account for things like boat limits. I oftentimes see people out fishing. I know this guy just got his Chinook Chinook for the day, and yet the gear goes back in. And I know there's a mix of Coho and Chinook and all that stuff, but is there any way to make any hay with the model if you catch your fish, you're through fishing for the day? Is that something that would go into the model that might get us a few impacts, Dr. Dapp?
Unfortunately, I don't think that we have that the capacity to do that currently in the modeling. We do have different ways of coming up with our fishery catches, kind of as we're developing those estimates in the preseason. And I think I spoke to it in the meeting yesterday a little bit. One of those methods of doing that is by looking at kind of a relative recent year effort. And so if you see kind of a shifting way in which people are fishing, then over time, that's something that we could look at is how that changes the effort. But at least right now, it's not something that we consider in the modeling.
And this one's from Mark. And why is it that you can't just by fiat say, we are short of impacts, therefore there will be a 4 Chinook limit this year? That's something that you have no way to do.
So why would we limit retention of hatchery fish when we're trying to harvest them?
Because it keeps the effort down. Once you've harvested your 4, that's gear that goes off the water. You did great. You got four nice Chinook, and the gear's off the water, and the impacts are gone.
So I don't necessarily have a good answer right now. I think we've thought about this in the past, and some of it's enforceability. I guess I've been a little distracted, and I don't have a good answer for you right now. But
Well, I've been going up to Alaska for decades. It's great fun, and the Kenai is a great place. And back in the day, the fishing was really good, but there was a very restrictive limit on the number of Chinook that you could catch. And that was something that's been enforced. It's worked out well, as far as I can tell, even though the returns are, they're having a hard time up there. But you don't get to go out and fish for Chinook every day on your Kenai tag. That's been that way for quite a while. So it is doable. And I would like to, at least maybe somebody would think about that. Otherwise, I'd like to wholeheartedly back the 3-day-a-week thing. And if we get it in July, because the numbers come out great. If not, whatever it takes to get the model down so that we can have a season. And if that means 3 days a week in August, so be it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Henry's next.
Yeah, just want, excuse me. Just want to make a comment about, if you are modeling Chinook non-retention during Coho in order to open up some 3-day, opportunities in July. I just, say that if we allocate a quota to that and it does not get utilized, I'd like to see that, that unutilized quota then somehow get shifted back into that Coho season. So it's initially scheduled for non-retention during whatever period of time, but if there's quota available, say, all right, we can go, to retention in whatever September for a little bit to use that up. And then one other thing on the kind of the annual limit comments. BC has done that I think that they make a distinction between outside of Vancouver, west side of Vancouver Island, and then east side of Vancouver Island. They've done some annual limit stuff on Chinook up there. I don't know, I haven't read anything about, how that works as far as, modeling, but, it it is happening in places.
Chad is next. Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that, having a quota or some sort, like for Chinook. The problem with something like that would be we're going to target bigger Chinook, so we're going to handle way more fish. We're going to look for bigger quality Chinook in that case versus, keeping something that, hatchery and legal. So I don't think you'll really see any less impact by going to something like that. I just think you're going to see a lot more fish handled and dying because of it. That's just my 2 cents.
Thanks, Chad. Kirsten, I don't know if you want to pop the slides back up on the screen with upcoming meetings on them. We're kind of slowing down on hands here, and I'll ask if Leah has the ability to pop on. So I just want to thank everybody for being here, and wanted to put these meeting dates up on the screen again as a reminder of some of the meetings we have upcoming and through the North of Falcon process. So again, on Friday, we've got a Columbia River meeting, Columbia River and Ocean discussion meeting. Next Tuesday is Willapa Bay fisheries discussion. Wednesday is a Grays Harbor fisheries discussion. And then starting Thursday of next week, we'll be doing morning meetings starting around 8:15 through the 13th, where we will talk through what the fishing seasons are shaping up to, any potential changes to what's been proposed. We're also going to try to keep the website updated as much as we can as modeling changes and proposals change. So we'll be talking through those each morning through the council process, and then directing folks to the website for comment and other things that way. As usually happens, as I begin to talk, I see more hands go up, so that's great. Adam's next with his hand up. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I would just like to say I'm okay with the 3-day-a-week thing. I would just highly recommend that it includes both days on the weekend, either Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or a Saturday, Sunday, Monday. People have vacation plans, especially for this year, already booked out for that opener. And it just makes it easier for families to get out on the weekends.
Thank you, Adam. Seth also had his hand up. Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the time listening to me speak, but I wanted to show support for the Bellingham Channel opening for the Bellingham Bay fishery. I've spent a lot of time on the west side of Remus Island as a kid fishing there, and it was pretty disheartening to see that closed. And also the 3-day-a-week opener, I'm in support of that, especially as Adam said, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It would get those weekend warriors a little bit more chance to get out if they work 5 days a week. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Dan has his hand up. Go ahead, Dan.
I just wanted to mention, I've been hearing these comments about the take your fish and go home come up again, and I find that a little bit disturbing. When I first got involved in this process and we were trying to get marked selective fisheries in place, there were members of the state commercial fisheries that wanted to go take your fish and go home as a way to avoid us getting marked selective. And if we advocate for that, we might find we have allies we wouldn't want. There could be people waiting to jump on that bandwagon that you're not aware of. Just wanted to point that out.
Thanks, Dan. So the reason I was going to have our friend Leah from Fish and Wildlife jump on is we've actually put a poll together for folks who are interested in filling it out. So when you leave, there's a little button down at the bottom of your screen that says leave the room. When you leave the room today, those polls are going to be in our main meeting room. essentially it's just whether or not you agree or disagree with the proposal about areas 7 and area 9. We've had them separately in the poll, thinking that there might be differences of opinion between those two different areas. So just it's a total informal poll. It's just based on the folks that are here today. We're you know, and again, it's just one proposal. I think we just have it as 3 days a week. I heard some recent suggestions here for a Saturday through Monday or Friday through Sunday. I don't think that's part of the proposal that's up on the poll, but just again, it helps us kind of center in on I think you know, we've heard a lot of great feedback and a lot of support. I just want to make sure that we're capturing all those folks' opinion who may not agree or may not have felt comfortable speaking here today. So I see Paul's hands raised. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, just wanted to comment real quick on the mention of potentially personal quotas, annual quotas. Having fished in Alaska, definitely familiar with those. Typically, you know, you can go up, do one trip, and you'll get your quota. Certainly for residents of Washington State, I would not be in favor of any type of quota. However, I'm assuming you have data and catch records from out-of-state anglers who come to our state. What would be the possibility of an annual quota for out-of-state license holders, and how would that impact the modeling?
So I don't think it would affect the modeling. I don't think that anglers who come out of state are I don't think they represent a large majority of our license holders. I'm pretty sure the majority of our license sales are from residents, but I don't have all the information on that. It's certainly something that we could think about, but I don't think trying to limit tourism or those kind of opportunities for folks coming in from out of state, I don't think it would make that huge of a difference in overall, especially for Puget Sound fisheries. Maybe more so on coastal fisheries where a lot more charter effort that may have an effect, but I can't imagine it would be too huge of an effect in Puget Sound.
Okay, thank you.
Carl, go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you where it would have an effect if you were to limit out-of-state fishers would be across a broad range of supporting services, from charters to hotels to restaurants. There's a lot of revenue there that is generated with the consumption of very few fish. It's the value per fish is very high on tourists. But my question was actually related to your poll at the end of this meeting. I just wanted to clarify that you mentioned if there was a 3-day-a-week opener, that the other days would be closed to fishing, no coho, no CNR salmon fishing. Would that also apply to Area 9?
Again, Carl, I think as I'm thinking about it and just thinking about impacts and modeling, I think it would at least be in effect if we were to go with a June or July opener for 7 and 9. I'm thinking at least for the month of July, it would be just the 3-day openers, close the other 4 days of the week to no fishing after that is how I'm thinking about it.
I appreciate that clarity. I will fill out the poll, but I'm here to tell you right now that as far as Marine Area 9 goes, we would rather see an August 1st opener than give up 4 days a week of salmon fishing for any species in order to get a 3-day-a-week opener in July 16th. So that's my 2 cents on that one. Thank you.
Okay, Mark, that looks like the last hand. Are you ready for me to close out the rooms and bring us back to the main room?
I am, as soon as I say thank you, everybody, for being here. Really appreciate everybody's thoughtful comments, the questions, the consideration on the fishing proposals. Great discussion today, great ideas, exactly what we're here for through this process. So just a big thank you to everybody here participating today.
Okay, I will close the rooms now.
Thank you, everybody.
Kirsten, can you see that poll on the screen?
Yes, I can.
I saw area 7, but there was none for area 9.
Yeah,
Yes,
same here.
I have to run numbers. I have to run 7 first, close that, and then I'll open up 9.
Okay, so everybody who wants to comment on both, just hang out for a minute. It looks like the numbers are coming in pretty quickly, coming in hot. So it shouldn't take too long to get that other one up there. Thanks, Leah.
Yeah, no problem. Right now we're at about 53% participated. Okay, about 38 have answered now.
Maybe we give it another minute or so. So anybody who's here, if you want to answer the area 7 question, get your answer in quick. Not seeing too many others.
I'm not either. We're kind of stopped at 38.
There's 39, 40.
Oh, we spoke
Starting to go up again. This is exciting.
Okay, so it does look like we've stopped now.
All right, last chance.
Yeah.
Area 7, going once, going twice. Leah, I'll let you do the honors.
Okay, I was looking here. It looks like we're 5 seconds away from 2 minutes. So I thought I'd let
Perfect.
it 2 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna close out this one and open area 9.
All right, everybody, area 9 is live. Go for it.
Hey, Kirsten, will you be able to give us the poll results here? We have to wait for that.
I can do it as soon as they're done running, I think.
Thank you.
Everybody can like place your bets, like anybody like, you know, $5 on red. I don't know, like everybody can kind of duke it out while we're waiting.
I'd like to ask that the poll said Thursday through Saturday. Is that kind of up in the air though? It could be Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or
I
Friday,
believe,
Saturday.
yeah, I think it was the 3 days. I don't think those dates are set. I think it would be either Thursday through Saturday, or we've heard also support for like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So I think
Right.
that's still up for debate. It's more, the focus here is the 3 days, not necessarily which days are in this right now. I think it's going to be, the focus is just those days. So.
Yeah, thank you.
But also with the assumption that it's going to be a July opener in exchange.
Yes, that is the conversation that is happening currently. Correct. Yeah, the 3 days would be to kind of be able to spread out those impacts and gain that time in July. That's kind of what the goal is.
Okay, we got about 15 seconds till 2 minutes on this one as well. Looks like we have 40 people, 41, 42. I think that's all that answered last time, Kirsten, isn't it?
So yeah, something around there.
Okay, so I'll give it a couple more seconds. Okay, there's 2 minutes. And the first poll, 33 out of 42 said yes, they would support the 3-day opener. 9 out of the 42 said no. And for Marine Area 9, 31 of the 42 said yes, and 11 of the 42 said no.
Thank you.
Oh, and I just realized I can share those results, so you guys can see them now, I think.
I just want to make aware that, you know, you may have a lot of constituents in Marine Area 7 that are voting on the future of Marine Area 9 because it's consistent with their wishes in Marine Area 7. I'm not sure that Area 9 constituents are going to support closures of the day of the week when it's not necessary. If you could be open 7 days a week. But, you know, so I don't know. I mean, this is one poll from this group of people, but I think the people that are familiar with this process and the ongoing testimony of getting days on the water, you know, why would you give up days on the water if you could be open for Coho, or, you know, have those days on the water by shifting your Chinook season later? That's always going to be the position of the charter industry is days on the water.
Thanks, Carl. And again, this is not, none of this is a totally done deal. So we'll take all that into consideration as we kind of go forward. Well, I guess I'll open it up to any last minute questions or anything like that. And if not, I think that probably be good.
Okay, I will close the meeting out. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks again, everybody. Really appreciate the comments, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you all.